You didn't run. You didn't beg. You didn't join the desperate line of people scrambling for their attention. No, you stood firm. You stayed silent. You let them feel the weight of your absence, and that wrecked them. While they thrived on being chased, you became the one thing they couldn't handle, untouchable. You didn't just walk away. You left a void so deep it swallowed their ego whole. You weren't an option. You were the consequence. And now they're left sitting in the wreckage, asking themselves why you didn't fall for their game, you didn't play their game. While others clamored for a fleeting moment of their attention, you stood apart, unmoved. Their existence thrived on validation, on being the center of orbiting souls. But you refused to circle their gravity. Your absence isn't a retreat, it's a reckoning, because you knew your worth. You knew their value was never as high as they wanted you to believe. And now, they're left grasping at shadows, replaying moments in their mind, searching for where they lost control. They built their lives on power they thought unshakable, wearing arrogance like armor. Their control over others was never questioned, until you. Like Saul on the road to Damascus, blinded by the truth that stripped away his delusions, they now face their own reckoning. They thrived on the chase, the pursuit feeding their fragile ego. But you didn't run after them, didn't give them the satisfaction of your longing. Instead, you held up the harsh light of reality. Your refusal to engage shattered their illusions. It wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. The truth they'd buried beneath layers of manipulation surfaced with your detachment, ripping apart the carefully constructed facade they used to control others. What they thought was strength crumbled into fear. Their deepest terror, the one they never dared to name, has come alive. They are powerless without the validation they demanded. Now, like Saul, they're left stumbling in the aftermath of revelation, exposed, disarmed, and questioning everything they believed about themselves. Your silence wasn't just defiance, it was transformation. They saw themselves stripped of the adoration they depended on and realized they were empty. You didn't destroy them. You forced them to see they were already hollow. The wound you left wasn't the end, it was the beginning of their fall. You refused to chase, and in that single act of defiance, their carefully constructed identity began to collapse. Their sense of superiority, built on the desperate energy of others, could not withstand the weight of your indifference. For the first time, they were forced to see themselves without the veil of power they wrapped around their existence. They weren't strong, weren't exceptional. They were dependent. Dependent on manipulation, on the control they exerted over those who ran after them, desperate for approval they never truly intended to give. Drop a comment. I refuse to chase, and watch their facade crumble under your indifference. Pride was their fortress, a towering illusion of strength they clung to desperately. They believed their inflated ego was unshakable, their power over others absolute. But as Proverbs chapter 16 verse 18 warns, pride comes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. And their fall began the moment you refused to chase, to bend, to validate the facade they so carefully constructed. Your silence wasn't just defiance, it was the catalyst for their undoing. The ego they built on the desperation of others couldn't withstand the void left by your absence. What they mistook for power was revealed as dependence. Without the control they thrived on, without the pursuit they demanded, they were left staring into the hollowness of their own pride. Now, standing amidst the ruins of their illusion, they see what they tried to ignore. Their strength was a lie. Their relationships, their control, their identity, all built on manipulation, couldn't survive the truth of your indifference. Pride comes before destruction, and it was their pride, not your actions, that led them to this breaking point. You didn't push them, you didn't fight them, you simply refused to feed their delusion, and that choice turned their towering arrogance into rubble, leaving them to confront the reality they could no longer deny. Their greatest fear was never losing you, it was being seen. Vulnerable, flawed, and stripped of the illusion they had woven so tightly around themselves. Your refusal to engage, to chase, to give them the validation they demanded was more than rejection, it was exposure. They thrived in the shadows of their own ego, but your indifference dragged them into a glaring light they couldn't escape. For so long they curated their image, projecting strength, control, and superiority, but beneath it all was fragility, an ego stitched together by the desperate need for others to believe the lie. And you, with your silence, your refusal to bend, became the scalpel that laid it bare. You forced them to confront the truth they hid from themselves. They were not invincible. As their carefully built facade crumbled, so too did their control over others. The power they thought they held was nothing more than fear masked as authority. Without your pursuit, they couldn't maintain the illusion. Their flaws, once hidden behind manipulation and pride, now screamed louder than their attempts to appear untouchable. You didn't destroy them, you revealed them, and in doing so, you became the embodiment of their worst nightmare, not someone they could lose, but someone who saw them for what they truly were. By walking away, you shattered the illusion they had worked so hard to maintain, their power, their control, their self-image. It all hinged on the belief that others needed them. But your refusal to follow, to beg, to cling, revealed the truth they feared most. Their strength was a lie. Your independence forced them to confront the vulnerability they had buried beneath layers of pride and manipulation. Without you playing the role they depended on, their emotional fragility stood exposed, naked and raw. They weren't unshakable. They weren't untouchable. They were a trembling house of cards, built on the desperate hope that no one would ever call their bluff. And you did. Not with anger or accusations, but by walking away without a second glance. That silence was louder than any confrontation. It echoed in their mind, growing heavier with every passing moment. Vulnerability isn't something they could handle, let alone accept. And now they're left grappling with it, realizing that their strength was borrowed, propped up by the approval and attention of others. You didn't just leave them behind. You left them to face the truth. Your independence wasn't defiance, it was a mirror, and in it, they saw the cracks they worked so hard to hide, widening into fractures they could no longer ignore. You refused to chase, and in doing so, you struck at the heart of their greatest insecurity: irrelevance. Their entire existence revolved around the belief that they were indispensable, that their presence was the gravity holding others together. But your detachment shattered that illusion, leaving them exposed to a truth they could no longer ignore. They were never the center. This message isn't for everyone, and if you don't feel it, that's fine, move along. But if you felt it, deep in your bones, you'll know this is for you. Here's to the chosen ones, the ones who don't fit in, the ones who see beyond the veil, the ones who've been told to stay quiet, to settle, to conform, but never could. They aren't interested in what's ordinary. They aren't here to follow someone else's rules. They're the light in the dark, the storm that shatters illusions, the unshakable, the unstoppable, the untouchable. While the world is busy running circles, they're walking their own path, alone if they must. Not for the applause, not for the approval, but because it's who they are. Here's to the ones who take what was meant to destroy them and transform it into something divine. The ones who carry wisdom that can't be taught, only earned. If this resonates with you, then maybe it's time to find your people. The Obsidian Inner Order is the only place of its kind, the #1 Ascension Nexus for chosen ones, where over 400 of us gather to share wisdom, connect and transform. No masks, no games, just truth. The link is in the description. If you're ready, you'll know where to find us. You saw through them, you always did. But this time you made it clear. You wouldn't play along. Your refusal wasn't just defiance, it was judgment, sharp and inescapable. The truth they'd hidden behind their mask now stood exposed, raw and undeniable, illuminated by the clarity you brought to the surface. They built their power on illusion, crafting an image that demanded admiration and submission, but your gaze cut through it like a blade. They wore their mask for so long they believed it had become their face. Confidence, control, superiority, all meticulously constructed to conceal their insecurity. But when you refused to chase, to plead, to need them, you stripped away the illusion. Your clarity was a mirror they couldn't avoid, reflecting the hollowness they tried so desperately to hide. Now, they stand naked in their truth, unraveling as the cracks in their facade widen into fissures. They can no longer shield themselves from the weight of your judgment. The silence you left wasn't just absence, it was revelation. The person they pretended to be, the power they thought they held, dissolved in the light of what you saw. They weren't unassailable. They weren't even whole. You didn't break them. You showed them the truth they feared the most. They had been broken all along. You left, and with your absence, the silence became deafening. For the first time they were alone, not just physically, but with themselves. Their unresolved insecurities, the ones they buried beneath bravado and manipulation, rose to the surface, relentless and unyielding. Without your presence to distract them or absorb their chaos, they were left with nothing but the weight of their own reflection. They relied on others to drown out the noise within, to validate the fragile identity they projected outward. But your decision to walk away stripped them of that comfort. The facade they built to hide their flaws began to crumble, leaving raw, exposed insecurities they could no longer ignore. The attention they once demanded from others now echoes as an empty void, a reminder that their strength was never real, only borrowed. In their isolation, every fear they tried to suppress surged forward, the fear of being unworthy, of being unseen, of being utterly insignificant. It all consumed them in the absence of your validation. What they called power was dependence. What they thought was control was fear. You didn't just leave. You took with you the last distraction they had from themselves. And now, surrounded by nothing but their own reflection, they're forced to face the truth they spent so long running from. Your detachment wasn't just a decision, it was a revelation. Like Dorian Gray's cursed portrait, which revealed the corruption and decay he tried to hide behind eternal youth, your absence reflected their deepest fears back at them. They built their lives on a facade, projecting confidence and control while burying insecurities they couldn't bear to confront. But just as Dorian's hidden painting became a grotesque mirror of his soul, your refusal to engage tore through their illusion, forcing them to face the truth they had always avoided. They were never as untouchable as they wanted others to believe. Your silence became the unrelenting mirror they couldn't shatter, showing every flaw, every insecurity, every fracture in the image they had worked so hard to maintain. Like Dorian, who lived in denial until his portrait grew unbearable, they now see the cracks widening in their carefully constructed persona. Without your validation, they are left alone with their fears. The fear of being unworthy, of being irrelevant, of being seen for what they truly are. You didn't need words. Your actions became the light that exposed the decay they spent a lifetime concealing. Now, just as Dorian couldn't escape his portrait, they cannot escape the reflection your absence has made unavoidable. Your detachment was more than a choice. It was a spotlight, cold and unyielding. Without your presence to obscure their reality, they are left with no distractions, no comforting illusions to shield them from the truths they buried. For years they projected strength, wielding manipulation to obscure the fractures in their self-worth. But now, with your silence ringing louder than words, they are forced to confront the one thing they feared most: themselves. They can no longer rely on the chase, the validation, or the false power they drew from controlling others. Every flaw they ignored rises to the surface, undeniable and relentless. The mirror they refused to look into is now unavoidable, showing them the cracks in their foundation. The fear of insignificance, the dread of inadequacy, and the weight of unaddressed insecurities descend like shadows they cannot escape. Your absence wasn't just a void, it was a revelation. It stripped away their excuses, forcing them into a brutal reckoning with their own reflection. The mask they wore has slipped, leaving them exposed to the very truths they spent a lifetime avoiding. They cannot run from the clarity you left behind, nor can they deny the flaws your detachment illuminated. Your growth wasn't just a shift, it was a seismic rupture, exposing everything they tried to keep hidden. They relied on illusions, of control, of strength, of being desired. But your evolution shattered those illusions, revealing the fragile foundation on which their self-image was built. They depended on your validation, on the unspoken agreement that you would stay small enough to fit within the narrative they created. But when you grew beyond their reach, it wasn't just a betrayal of their expectations, it was a revelation of their weakness. They had constructed an identity around being unshakable, but your growth tore that identity apart. The cracks in their carefully curated image widened, exposing their dependence on the approval of others to feel whole. Without you feeding their ego, they were left floundering, searching for the scaffolding that held their self-worth together. Your success wasn't just a reflection of your strength. It was a mirror held up to their emptiness, one they couldn't avoid. Now, they see the truth they worked so hard to deny. Their power wasn't real. Their confidence wasn't rooted in themselves, but in the control they wielded over others. And as your light grows brighter, the shadows of their inadequacies stretch longer, impossible to ignore. Your peace wasn't passive. It was a force, unyielding and undeniable. It didn't just silence their manipulative tactics, it exposed them. Every calculated move they once relied on, every subtle tug at your emotions, now lies useless against the wall of your independence. They thrived on control, on weaving chaos to tether others to their game, but your calm dismantled it all. Their power wasn't real, it was only effective in the absence of clarity, and your authenticity lit up every corner they tried to keep shadowed. As you grew rooted in your independence, their schemes began to unravel. Their manipulations, once so subtle and effective, now seem hollow, even to themselves. The lies they told to maintain their grip crumble when faced with the solidity of your truth. What they once used to destabilize others now only highlights their own lack of substance. Your stillness became the stark contrast to their chaos, revealing how much of their identity was built on deceit, pretense and control. They can't escape it now, the mirror of authenticity you hold up with every unshaken moment. Your peace makes their emptiness inescapable, and no matter how much they twist and turn, they cannot manipulate the truth you've become. You stepped away, and with that single act, their carefully crafted illusion of control shattered. For so long, they thrived by casting blame, by manipulating others into carrying the weight of their shortcomings. But your absence stripped them of their favorite weapon, deflection. Now, left alone with no scapegoats, they are forced to confront the truth they've avoided at all costs. Every decision, every consequence, every broken piece of their story points back to them, and there's nowhere left to run. They built their power on control, orchestrating chaos to keep attention away from their flaws. But your refusal to engage exposed the frailty of their dominance. Without someone to twist, to push, or to blame, they are trapped in the inescapable mirror of accountability. The narrative they once commanded now spirals, and the realization cuts deep. The mess they see was never caused by others. It was their own creation. Your silence isn't just absence, it's a reckoning. It forces them to sit with every manipulation, every failure, every fracture they tried to cover up with control. For the first time, the weight of their actions falls solely on their shoulders. They can no longer shift it. Your departure didn't just unsettle them, it forced them to face themselves. Your growth speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. They may resist it, deny it, even resent it, but they cannot escape the impact of your example. While they cling to chaos and control, your path reveals a truth they can no longer ignore. True power lies in self-mastery. Their manipulation falters in the face of your clarity. Their chaos feels hollow against the calm you've cultivated. Your transformation is undeniable, forcing them to witness what genuine self-work looks like. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about, Rumi said. And your peace embodies this silence, a state they cannot touch or disrupt. You've stepped into a space they don't understand, where growth doesn't need validation, and healing doesn't beg for recognition. They wanted to hold you within the confines of their games, but your evolution has moved you beyond their reach. Even unwillingly, they learn from you. The fractures in their own persona grow harder to ignore when faced with your wholeness. Your actions dismantle their belief that control equates to strength. They see now, though they won't admit it, that growth isn't forced or demanded. It's cultivated from within. And that is a power they have yet to grasp. Their tactics have failed, and the collapse is undeniable. The victimhood they wielded so expertly, the calculated blame shifting, the emotional bait, they all bounce back now, ineffective and hollow. What once trapped others in cycles of guilt and longing now leaves them stranded in their own web. You have broken the feedback loop they depended on, and with it, their illusion of control crumbles. They feel, perhaps for the first time, what they wanted you to feel. The gnawing anxiety, the empty longing, the suffocating powerlessness. Like Icarus in Greek mythology, they soared too high on the wings of their manipulations, believing their schemes made them invincible. But their overconfidence blinded them to the inevitable fall. They ignored the warnings, the limits of their control, until the very methods they relied on became their undoing. Now, their once effective tactics leave them exposed, vulnerable, and spiraling. You didn't fight their games, you simply refused to play. That choice turned the energy they aimed at you inward, forcing them to confront the chaos they created. The control they craved slips further from their grasp, and they are left exactly where they tried to place you, uncertain, unmoored, and powerless. Their fall was inevitable, and your strength ensured it. Their mask is slipping, and no amount of control, charm, or feigned maturity can hold it in place anymore. For so long they projected an image of confidence, commanding attention and reverence, but the cracks are widening, revealing the fragile reality underneath. Your independence has stripped away their facade, exposing the truth they worked so hard to conceal. They are not powerful. They are scared, insecure, and desperately clinging to an illusion that no longer serves them. Like Victor Hugo's Inspector Javert, who believed in his own moral superiority until confronted with Valjean's mercy, they are undone by the undeniable contrast between who they pretend to be and who they truly are. Your growth, your refusal to be ensnared by their games, has forced them to see the disparity. What they projected as control was a shield for their fear. What they called maturity was a brittle defense against their own inadequacy. Now, the cracks cannot be hidden. Every move they make, every attempt to reassert dominance, only emphasizes the gap between their image and reality. Their charm falters, their composure wavers, and beneath the slipping mask lies the raw, unpolished truth they can no longer deny. You didn't pull the mask off, you made it irrelevant. Your journey is proof that power comes from within. By focusing on yourself and stepping away from toxic dynamics, you've reclaimed what was always yours: freedom. Your growth doesn't just heal you, it ripples outward, forcing change in places even you cannot see. By refusing to chase, you broke cycles of dependence and manipulation, showing others the strength in walking away. Be like the lotus, trust in the light, grow through the dirt, believe in new beginnings. Your choice to rise above their manipulation wasn't just an act of defiance, it was a declaration of power. You didn't succumb to their games or allow their chaos to consume you. Instead, you held firm in your truth, and in doing so, you shattered the illusion they clung to. Their worst fear was never losing control, it was being exposed. Your strength confirmed it. They are not as untouchable as they wanted to believe. By refusing to engage, you dismantled their patterns, turning the very tactics they used against others into mirrors reflecting their own insecurities. Your integrity became the light that illuminated their darkness, forcing them to face the truth of who they are. You've proven that real power lies not in manipulation, but in the ability to walk away without losing yourself. You've disrupted the cycle they depended on, and stood unshaken in your independence, showing the unmatched resilience of a chosen one. Now it's your turn to inspire others. Share your story. Speak your truth. Show the world what it means to rise, to refuse, and to reclaim. In your words, others will find the courage to break free just as you did. Let your voice become the spark for their transformation.